Welcome to Simpler Bible, a daily journey to biblical understanding. Today for episode 33, we're going to be in Exodus 17 and 18. We left off with the manna yesterday, and now here the people are, and they are finally getting their act together. They're finally excited about it. They finally trust God. Oh wait, none of that is true. They still hate God. They're still angry at Moses. They're still quarreling and grumbling as they have been since they left Egypt. If you ever thought for a moment that the Israelites were mostly good, on their Exodus journey, this is not the case at all. They were terrible. They would have been the person in the car asking every 5 minutes, are we almost there? That would have been the person. And they would have needed to stop at every single gas station. It would have been a pain. So water from a rock, all right? Chapter 17, beginning in verse 1. All the congregation of the people of Israel moved on from the wilderness of Sin by stages, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim. But there was no water there for the people to drink. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. And Moses said to them, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord? But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children with livestock, and our livestock with thirst? You would think that at this point that this would not be the argument that they're making anymore, right? Remember in chapter 14, the Egyptians came up behind them in the Red Sea and they're like, why'd you bring us out here to die? And then the last chapter, they're like, now we're going to die of hunger. We don't have any food. And now they're saying, now we're going to die of thirst. So they are not confident people. They are not people who have actually put any of their trust or any of their belief in God. They do not trust him. They do not, they're not relying on God well. All right. So Moses cried out to the Lord, what shall I do with this people? They're almost ready to stone me. And the Lord said to Moses, pass on before the people, taking with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders. This is referenced for us in 1 Corinthians 10:4. I'll scroll over here so you can see. 1 Corinthians 10, beginning in verse 1. For I want you to know, brothers, that all of our fathers were all under the same cloud. That's the cloud that led them by day. All passed through the Red Sea, or through the same sea. That's the Red Sea. All were baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea. All ate the same spiritual food. That's the manna. And then all drank from the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. So this rock over here, strike the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders. This rock is a picture of Christ. At least Paul tells us that that's the case. And you might think, okay, that's interesting. How in the world is this rock a picture of Christ? Well, the rock was struck, and water came from the rock for the salvation of the people. Christ was struck for our salvation. It's as simple as that. This is a picture right here of Jesus. And so don't miss this. The people are grumbling against God. Is God actually going to provide for us? Is God actually going to take care of us or not? And here again is a picture not only of the fact that God will provide for them, but there's a spiritual picture here in place of God ultimately providing for his people and for all the people of the earth through Christ, who was struck for our sins. And from Christ being struck, life was given. Now, this story of the rock is going to be repeated for us in Numbers 20, and it's going to be about 38 years later, and we'll see this picture again, but we'll talk about that when we get there in the book of Numbers. Verse 7 says, and he called the name of the place Massa Meribah because of the quarreling of the people of Israel, because they tested the Lord by saying, is the Lord God among us or not? Now, again in 1 Corinthians 10, if we go there, it says that these people ate the same spiritual food, drank the same spiritual drink. Nevertheless, with most of them, God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. This is again 1 Corinthians 10, beginning in verse 6. Now, these things took place as examples for us, that we would not desire evil as some of them did. Do not be idolaters as some of them were. And it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Do not indulge in sexual immorality as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in a single day. Do not put Christ to the test as some of them did and were destroyed by the serpents. Do not grumble as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. These things happened to them as examples for us, but were written down for our instruction, on whom the ends of the ages has come. So when you're reading this and you're reading these people grumbling over and over and over again against God. Oh, here are the Egyptians. Why are we at the Red Sea? We're going to die. Oh, We don't have any food to eat. God provides food. Oh, we don't have any water to drink. God provides water. These people constantly grumble against God, constantly test God, going, are you even here or not? And Paul uses this as a warning to the church in 1 Corinthians to remind them to not grumble or test the Lord in that way, that we are supposed to have our faith resting in the things of God. So Amalek comes. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Rephidim is a place where they camped in Exodus 13. And it says, so Moses said to Joshua, choose for us men to go out and fight Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. Sorry, Exodus 13 was not where they're camped at Rephidim. Exodus 13, if you'll remember, is where it says that God said, I'm not going to lead them by the way of the Philistines. I don't want them to face war and then get discouraged and go back to Egypt. So this is their first war now that they've been out of Egypt. This is their first battle. As you will see in a minute, it is less than 3 months out. We're going to see in the next couple of chapters that they've been traveling for 3 months. And so this is less than 3 months. We know that it's more than a month because of what we read last time. So this is somewhere between, this is maybe the middle of month 2, early on in month 3, something like that. And so this is going to be their first battle. Look at verse 10. So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek while Moses and Aaron and Hur went up on the hill. When Moses held up his hands, Israel prevailed, but whenever he lowered his hands, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side, one on the other side. So his hands were steady until the sun went down. So this is Moses. Remember when he lifted up his staff and he parted the Red Seas by the power of God. Now he's lifting up his staff and the people of God are winning their first battle. But whenever his arms get too tired and his arms drop, they begin to lose. And so Moses, overlooking this battle scene, sees this. Aaron and Hur see this and they hold up Moses' hands. They sit him down on a rock and they are able to win the battle as they hold up Moses' hands. Just a neat little something there to consider. Verse 13, Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this as a memorial in a book, recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. And Moses built an altar and called it the name of the Lord, or called the name of it, the Lord is my banner, saying, a hand upon the throne of the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. This idea of banners in the Bible, we see it a couple of different places, and I just want you to consider it. So like a banner from a military perspective was used to kind of as a rallying point for people to come to. And so when we think as Christians about what our banner is, I think that a lot of times Christians will make their banner be something other than Jesus. It'll be kind of their denomination of choice, or it'll be a particular end times view or a particular view about salvation. It'll be a particular teaching of this person or that person. So people walk around and ask, oh, are you a disciple of so-and-so? Or have you learned from this guy? Or do you read this person's books? And I don't want to out anybody or throw out any names here because it'll be recorded forever. So I just won't do that. But we kind of tend to talk in those circles, like who's your favorite author, who's your favorite preacher. And I don't think those are bad things to do, but I think we need to be really careful that as Christians, our banner and the only banner that we should have is the banner of Christ. God is our banner, Christ is our banner, Christ is our provider. All of our life, our rallying point as Christians is Jesus. That's our rallying point. And so that's something I think that is important for us to note. Now, Chapter 18, we're going to see Jethro again. That's Moses' father-in-law. We haven't seen him in a while. He is the priest of Midian. Moses' father-in-law heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel and the people and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. So Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, is going to come and visit Moses, and he's going to bring him his 2 sons, Gershom and Eleazar, along with his wife. And so Gershom and Eleazar. Eleazar, you're going to find is interesting. I told you back on episode 3. Is that right? Let me think. No, episode 2. I told you in episode 2 when we were introduced to Eve that it talks about her being a suitable helper. No suitable helper was found for Adam. And so God made Eve for him. And I told you that that word helper is only used about 20 times in the Old Testament in that way. It always means God's divine help. So this is Moses' son, Eleazar, and it's the same kind of word. It means helper, and it means the God of my father was my help. So God is my help is what Eleazar means. God is my help. And so just an interesting thing to note. This is one of those places in the Bible, same kind of word as Eve being the helper to Adam. So Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, comes along with his sons and his wife. Look at verse 5 here. Meets them in the wilderness where he was encamped at the mountain of God. This would be Sinai. And we'll see that in just a moment. And when he sent words to Moses, he said, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife, with her 2 sons with her. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other of the welfare, and then they went into the tent. Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and all the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them on the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, and that he had delivered them out of the hands of the Egyptians. Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hands of the Egyptians, out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. So Jethro and Moses' father, verse 12. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. Now look at this, verse 13. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. Moses' father-in-law saw that he was doing for the people, and he said, What you are doing, what is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people stand around you from morning to evening? Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to inquire of God, come to Moses. So all the people, I want you to think about this. Remember, over 1 million people. And Moses is just sitting around. The people are coming and talking to him all day long, asking him questions about God, asking what God is going to do next, asking what God's will is. And then in verse 16, when they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws. Moses' father-in-law said, and this is key, what you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You're not able to do it alone. There's just a lot of wisdom in this. I don't want to make a deep spiritual thing about this. There is a lot of wisdom in this, though. And I've been doing ministry since, 1997. And the number of people that I have watched do some sort of ministry, be in some sort of church ministry and quit, get weary of it, bail out, get tired of it is way more than I can remember or count at this point. It's a lot. And I think that sometimes it's because, kind of like Moses, they feel like they've got to do it all by themselves. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're in a ministry position, don't be like Moses. Don't be foolhardy like that and think that it's all upon you, all upon your shoulders, all on your back to get everything done. It will wear you out, and it'll wear your people out too, because you won't be able to be a blessing to them as a leader like you should be. So anyway, Jethro is going to give him some advice. He's going to say, appoint some judges, appoint some people to help you. And he says this in verse 21, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe. Place such men over the people of chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Let them judge the people at all time. Every great matter they will bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves, so it'll be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. So this is kind of like almost a judicial system that's being set up. And so there were men who were over 10 men. There were people who literally were appointed over 10. So if anybody in that 10 had a dispute with anybody else in that 10, what they would do is they would go to their judge. And if it was something that he couldn't handle, he would refer it to the guy who's over the 50. And if it was something he couldn't handle, he referred to the guy who's over 1,000 or 100. And then if he couldn't handle it, he'd refer it to the guy who's over 1,000. There were 4 levels of judges before it got to Moses. If it couldn't be decided by the guy who was over 10, couldn't be decided by the guy over 50 or 100 or 1,000, then it would be brought to Moses. But as you can imagine, most of those things were able to be handled by the smaller courts, if you will. If you do this, verse 23, if you do this, God will direct you, and you will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace. So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law, did everything that he had said. Moses chose able men out of all of Israel and made them heads over all the people, chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and they judged the people at all times. Any hard case they brought to Moses, but any small matter they decided themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went away to his own country. And so they're kind of, one of the things that you'll notice is that Moses said that they'll come to me and I make known to them the laws of the Lord. This is what Moses is about to do. He is just a couple of chapters away from going up on Mount Sinai and meeting with God and learning all the statutes and all the ordinances of God. And now Moses will have in place people who can help him disseminate that information. So when you read this text and you think about the rock that struck, you think about the grumbling of the people, you think about the banner of the Lord, you think about just the helper, right? There being another time that God is helper. You think about all this stuff. There's a lot of little beautiful pieces in this. Does it point to Christ? Yeah, the rock points to Christ. The water from the rock points to Christ. Christ was struck on our behalf. And it's always beautiful when we can find pictures in the Old Testament that help us understand Jesus better. But I hope that you've enjoyed today, and let's catch up again tomorrow. Thank you so much for journeying with us today at Simpler Bible through another section of Scripture where we come to know and understand God a little bit better. Look, if you're brand new to Simpler Bible, we have all sorts of resources available for you. Go to our website, simplerbible.com, and there you can find these videos, you can find our podcast, you can find links to our social media, and you can even find a blog post with additional scriptures if you want to go into a little bit more study than we had time to cover in this podcast and video today. We hope that this tool will be exactly that for you, a tool. Not something that replaces your daily walk with God, but something that enhances your daily walk with God and helps you to know and enjoy Him more. Thank you so much for being part of this, and we'll see you again tomorrow.